Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk. And in this week's episode, I want to just ask you kind of a philosophical question, and that is, can God be stopped? And it seems like a silly question because, no, who's going to stop God, right? How about, can the will of God be thwarted? And you're probably thinking, well, no, if God can't be stopped and his will can't be thwarted. Well, what about his prophecy? If you know his prophecy ahead of time, is that able to be stopped? I want you to think for a second for Satan. God promised in Genesis that he would send an offspring of Eve that would crush Satan's head. And the people understood that God was going to send a Messiah into the world. And we're told that Satan entered Judas so that Judas would betray Jesus and then ultimately be handed over and be crucified. And so I've always found it interesting, did God dupe Satan? Or did Satan not know that, Jesus was a Messiah and that God was going to atone for mankind's sin through the blood of the Messiah? Did Satan not know this, that he's actually becomes a willing participant that helps bring about the prophecy of God? Why would Satan do that? If man was separated from God through sin, and the payment for sin was death and blood, and God, in the Old Testament, he prophesies that he's going to send a Messiah that would bring about the healing of the nations and a reconciliation of man. If Satan thought that Jesus was the Messiah, why would Satan cooperate with God's plan? It doesn't make any sense. The question is could he do anything about it? Because it seems like if you know prophecy is going to happen and you recognize that prophecy, it seems counterproductive. It seems like there would be a way to kind of change it and to stop it. It's kind of like if you saw a car careening towards I don't know, a group of bystanders. If you saw that, you would warn them ahead of time. If you think about people that maybe have ESP or the ability to somehow see the future, I certainly think some people are gifted in that. Then people that are gifted in that, they usually will issue warnings to people so that that doesn't ever have to happen. You've probably had in your gut before that certain things were going to happen, or, if someone does this, maybe something's not going to turn out well. And you are compelled, if you care about the person, to tell them so that it won't. And so this is where prophecy is a very interesting thing. Why does God reveal his hand? And if he does reveal his hand, and he does, why didn't Satan not play into that? Does God give us prophecy to warn us? Yes. So one of the reasons why we have prophecy is because that is God's warning that, we better be prepared because something's going to happen. The question is if he warns us, why can't we change it? And if it was possible to change it, why would he reveal his hand? So prophecy, it can't be changed, which is a very fascinating concept. If we know something's happening, then why can't we change it? We've got free will. What stops us? You see, this is why I don't get worried. People get really hung up on how wicked, things have become. And listen, I speak out against it. But I'm not consumed about the wickedness of the world because you can't fight prophecy. But why can't you? It seems like we ought to be able. And so we have free will. God reveals his hand ahead of time. Try as hard as you might, you're not going to be able to change it. Which once again gets into, maybe that's why Satan didn't not have Jesus crucified. Maybe that's why Satan didn't not enter Judas? Like, he couldn't do anything about it anyways. Is it because he can't? Or is it because he just can't control himself? It's interesting to consider. Why am I even thinking about this? Well, I don't know. The other day I couldn't sleep, which happens more often than I like. And when I especially can't sleep, I listen to maybe, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 different Bible readings at a time. And those are all like 15 minutes each. And I mean, it beats probably just scrolling on my phone, watching videos or reading news articles all night. But I was struck by one of my readings the other day that I was listening to. I guess I should call it a listening rather than a reading. And it came from 2 Kings chapter 8. And it has to do with Elisha, who I would consider Elisha one of the top 3 prophets. I mean, Elijah's always been, for me, it seems like the number one. And on the Mount of Transfiguration, you have Moses and Elijah. Man, it's hard not to have Isaiah up there because Isaiah just really nails the prophecies about the coming Messiah. But I have to tell you, somewhere in there is Elisha too. In fact, in many respects, it seems like Elisha does some more crazy things than Elijah, but Elijah's the one that gets taken to heaven without dying, not Elisha. So I think we got to keep Elijah number one. Long story short, very interesting story in the Bible about Elisha. I think I'm going to do a sermon series about him after the first of the year, trying to nail it down. And this will be one of the ones I talk about. So Elisha's got this weird relationship with this foreign kingdom, the kingdom of Aram. And they're not Israelites, and they don't, believe in the Israelite God, but for some reason, like, the kings of Aram respect Elisha as being this mighty prophet, even if that's not like their top god of choice. And so the king of Aram is sick, and he wants to know if he's going to recover from his illness. So he sends one of his people to Elisha to Israel. And what's interesting is Aram's like constantly attacking Israel, and they feel at liberty to send someone to consult one of Israel's great prophets to let him know if he's going to get better. Listen to the story, 2 Kings 8, starting verse 7. Now Elisha went to Damascus, and Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, was ill. And then, and I apologize, I said they sent someone into Israel to ask Elisha. Elisha actually appears to be outside of Israel in this text. So Elisha's in Damascus, and the king of Aram, Ben-Hadad, he's ill. And when the king was old, the man of God, when the king was told, the man of God has come all the way up here. So Elisha wanders into foreign territory. And he said to Hazael, he said, take a gift with you and go and meet this man of God. Consult the Lord through him. Ask him, will I recover from my illness? So Hazael, he went to meet Elisha, taking with him a gift of 40 camel loads of all the finest wares of Damascus. He went and he stood before Elisha, and he said, your son, Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, has sent me to ask. Your son. It's a terminology of submission, of honor, of respect. In other words, the king of Aram thinks so highly of you. He looks to you almost as a spiritual father. So your son, the king of Aram, has sent me to ask, will I recover from this illness? Listen to Elisha's answer. He says, go and say to him, you will certainly recover. Nevertheless, the Lord has revealed to me that he will in fact die. Now, what kind of answer is that? You will certainly recover, O king, my son. But the Lord has revealed to me that you'll die. Now, that seems a little counterintuitive, and so much is when we deal with God. Not that the logic is wrong in God's end, it's just wrong on ours, but now the rest of the story. So Elisha stares at Hazael after he delivers this message, so much so that Hazael's feeling a little uncomfortable. It says he was embarrassed. And then suddenly Elisha begins to weep. So put yourself in like the story. I love stories in scripture. I know you guys know that. I teach in story. I think in story. I relate in story. I understand God in story. So you've got this foreign king that's sending someone to Elisha because Elisha's up in his neck of the woods. Will the king survive this illness? In fact, he will, but he will die. And then Elisha just gives that stare. You know, you've got that stare. You've received that stare. You know, the stare that like shoots through someone, like almost penetrates their soul. So much so Hazael's uncomfortable. If you've ever had a conversation with someone and they stare you in the eyes too long, I mean, it's just a little uncomfortable, right? I mean, just normal, like, self-awareness. You don't sit there and just keep staring at someone's eyes unless you're trying to read their soul. And suddenly Elisha begins to weep. Why is my Lord weeping? Asked Hazael. Elisha says this, because I know the harm you will do to the Israelites, he answered. You will set fire to their fortified places. You will kill their young men with the sword. You will dash their little children to the ground, and you will rip open their pregnant women. Now Elisha is saying this to Hazael, the servant of the king. Hazael said, how could your servant, a mere dog, I mean, I'm not the king of Aram, how could I accomplish such a feat? The Lord has shown me that you will become king of Aram, Elisha answered. Then Hazael left Elisha, and he returned to his master. And when Ben-Hadad asked, what did Elisha say to you? Hazael replied, he told me that you will certainly recover, O king. But the very next day, Hazael took a thick cloth. He soaked it in water and spread it over the king's face. He waterboarded him so that he died. Then Hazael succeeded him as king. I wonder if that's where we got the idea of waterboarding from. I wonder if we get it from Scripture. So, in fact, the king was going to recover according to, like, what he had. Like, he wasn't going to die. But Elisha said he's going to be murdered. And that's exactly what Hazael does. His ambition, maybe believing in this prophecy that Elisha shared gave him motivation, courage. Here's what's crazy about this. Like, now, here's what I don't know, right? We got to be careful not to read into Scripture. What I don't know is, did he have some soldiers with him to kind of protect him? Maybe. Of course, he's going to see a prophet of God, and they're not necessarily known to just like kill people that show up and, you know, are getting advice from them. So the question, like, as I was listening to this the other night, I thought, God has shown Elisha what evil Hazael's about to do to Israel. So much so that Elisha's weeping. And my question is why doesn't Elisha kill Hazael? Why does he even encourage Hazael with these words? So much so that he's weeping. Like, if he had chosen to, like, right there say, Hazael, come here. I've got a message for you. And to plunge a dagger into his gut and get out of Damascus, head back to Israel. Like, that would spare pregnant women being opened, children being slaughtered, and all of the the evil that was about to befall Israel because of Hazael. And then it becomes clear to me, a prophecy of God can't be thwarted. Either God somehow doesn't allow Elisha to even comprehend such a thing, or Elisha, as a dedicated prophet of the Lord, knows that his job is only to prophesy, and as part of that, he cannot thwart, he cannot interfere with God's will. Is like either he physically is restrained so that he can do nothing about it, and mentally restrained that he can do nothing about it, or he has so much self-control that he chooses not to do something about it. Like, I don't have the answer to that, but it couldn't be stopped, even if he had tried. I mean, if Elisha had tried to put a dagger into Hazael's gut, it would have snapped off without even going in. Like, God's will cannot be thwarted. So taking that back to why didn't Satan stop? I don't think Satan knew God's will can't be thwarted. So by golly, he's going to get whatever pleasure out of inflicting evil on God himself, while he had opportunity, because he knew that even if he didn't, it would not be thwarted. One way or the other, it was going to happen. So he might as well get his jollies off of it. And I think even in my own life, I've seen this where I like to say sometimes, quite often, depending on what the situation is, God allows me to see around corners. Not always, and boy, when I can't, I have a little bit of stress about decisions I make and so forth. But just the other day, I was counseling, and I had a very strong feeling that the one person that was in there wanted to be there, and the other one finally got to the point that they're willing to come. And even before they walked in, I had a feeling, at least, that it would only be a one-time visit. And I was as I was going through the session, I felt the need to say this one thing, and I kind of didn't do it until the very end. And I did it out of obedience because I felt like I was being compelled to say it, like it needed to be said. And as soon as the words came out of my mouth, I felt like it is finished. Like that sealed the deal. Like they're not going to be coming back because people don't want to hear the truth. And I knew it in my gut, yet I still said it. Now, in the flesh, in the worldly, I would not want to say that because I'd want to be able to keep that influence and keep them coming. But in the spirit, I knew that this was something I was to declare. And that when I did declare it, it would pretty much mean that, they wouldn't come back. And so I declared it anyways. Why? Because I think even when God chooses to reveal something to us, it's not like seeing a train wreck that's about to happen. That's something you can intervene. You could, but it just wouldn't be right. Because in obedience, you're called to follow what God's telling you to say and to do and to be, rather than what might serve you best or you think might serve other people best. That's you're not called to consider that. It's kind of an interesting concept, isn't it? So, points of application: stop fighting prophecy. I mean, we've got prophecy about what the end times are going to be. Stop fighting it. It's going to be what it's going to be. You're not going to do anything about it. Speak out for what the truth is, but don't let it keep you up at night. Submit to prophecy. You can fight it all you want, but you're not being obedient to God. So submit to whatever prophecy is God's fulfilling in your lifetime and my time. Remember, this is consistent with when Jesus was asked, Lord, teach us how to pray. How does Jesus teach us to pray? He says for us to pray this: your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And when we submit ourselves to the will of God on earth as it is in heaven, then we have no desire to fight prophecy, even though we know it's going to blow up into a huge hot mess, even when we know it's going to hurt, even when we know it's going to be like very painful and just like not a good situation. We are compelled to say and to do it anyways because we act out of obedience to God. So on one hand, I think God chooses people to accomplish his will that won't fight his will. But even for those who would fight his will, they're not able to go against it. I'm reminded of this. It was a false prophet. I should have looked it up ahead of time, but it just kind of jumped to my mind. It was some kind of it wasn't a prophet of Israel. It was some other prophet, and some king calls him to a mountain to overlook the battlefield to put a curse upon Israel. And every time he does it, he ends up blessing Israel and cursing the king who's paying him to give him a blessing. And it's like he just can't control it. He can't stop it. Like, and the king's getting frustrated, and he's like, I can't say nothing other than what God's commanded me to say. It's a weird thing. So in essence, it's like either Satan just knows he can't do anything about it anyways, or in the end, he's a pawn of God. But I'm not always really comfortable with free will to say like God somehow manipulates us like a puppet. I don't think he does, but in a way that is beyond our ability to comprehend. The prophecy of God is so great that he can reveal his hand like it's a poker game, and he's saying, I've got 3 kings and 3 aces and 2 kings. How are you going to beat it? And the answer is you can't. So as we live in this broken, dysfunctional world, I just encourage you with these words. Don't fight it. God's prophecy cannot be thwarted. The world's going to become increasingly wicked. There will be terrible times. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, everything else that the Bible describes. There's going to be pastors and preachers saying what their itching ears want to hear. We need to call it out. But you ain't going to fight it. You ain't going to change it. The best thing that you can do is make people aware that it's going on and that there's another prophecy coming, and that is the return of Christ. And we're told, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. People will be eating, drinking, and being given in marriage, and it will come like a thief in the night. Speak the truth, learn the truth, submit yourself to this prophecy of Scripture, and be prepared when he comes. Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk, and I look forward to talking to you next time. God bless.